Okay, in this recording what we're going to look at here is the concept here of using a list object. Here's my list object, and I'm going to use it as a container. Let me go through and run it to show you what I want the last object to end up as. And here's this graph which I want you to pay attention to, and then we have some calculations and some text fields which really are not that interesting, but I'll show it to you. So we came through and we're running it, and what I have down here is category. I've got 2008 category of computers, and here's this little graph. This graph is the interesting part. It's very difficult to see here because the ratio of the difference, this represents 99 to 1 down here, so you can see a very limited relationship here. But this relationship is going to be based on sales and returns for the individual year and the individual computers. So you see this ratio here is different than this one. So what I'm trying to show you is we can take this object and tie it to an individual instance of a row within a list. Let's go on and take a look at the first one as I've got down in here, and you see that's 1.6. And if I blow this up a little bit, well, actually a lot, we might be able to see, come over to that graph, it's still itsy bitsy, but we'll blow it up a little bit more, and we'll go to 500%. And bring that on over and see if I can find the graph there. And now you can see there's a little something appearing down here. If the ratio was tighter, obviously it would show better. So let's go back to where I'm supposed to be, and let's get back over to the design view and start building this. As usual, I'm going to be flipping back and forth between design view and run view, and I'll also be pausing to allow the system to catch up with me. This query that we're going to be use is based on an OLAP, a Mathino Group's OLAP instance, and let me show you the query. What I did was I opened the query, I went into the report server and just selected the shared data set and said to run it in Report Builder. And let me execute the query and then we'll talk about it. So what we have down here is I brought back over from the measures group, I brought over sales amount and sales return amount off the sales cube. Right. Sales folder, as I drop down here, sales amount and then sales return amount. And then I brought in the dimensions. I brought in product category name off of product, wherever that is, product category name. And then I also brought in the fiscal year member of the fiscal calendar. So that would be off a date and fiscal year, and I brought that in. And you can also, by the way, bring it in this way for what it's worth. Then I added these, that is fiscal year and product category, also up here into the filters. It's because I only wanted to return certain ones down here, so we just didn't fill this up. And so when I added that up, I added in the date dimension, the fiscal year hierarchy, and it's equal to, and set that equal to 7, 8, and 9. I did not set it as a parameter as we've done earlier, so that I wouldn't have to call that into the report. And that's the query that we used, and then I saved it as Mathino Group 2012 OLAP underscore sales FY fiscal year 7, 8, and 9 underscore 3 categories into Report Builder, and that's my shared data set. Now, here it is coming back down, and you see it and you saw that execute. So that's the point we're going to start with over in a new instance. Now, before I do that, I want to see this in the list. I'm going to right click in the list over here on the row, and I'm going to go into row group properties. Remember, a list operates when we set up this group properties, we can use a list to operate on a grouping of individual rows. So I want to group here on the product category name over in here, and also on fiscal year. All right, so that's what I set up over here in the grouping. Let me cancel out of that, and that's why when I run this, I get this over in here, and I get audio for 2007 and 2008 and for 2009, and then when I come through, I'm on 2007. So I'm sorry, backing up. TV and video, etc. So let's go back over to design, and we'll leave this, and let's go in and start building this. So now I've got the standard template that we worked with earlier, and I would enter a report name in here. So I'm going to just enter a report name, and I'm going to call it as demo list as container. It really doesn't matter. And I'm going to save that. And I just copied that. That's what I did. And we'll pop in here. I'm going to say save as in case I manage to blow this thing up. And I don't want to save it into the templates. So I'm going to go into sites. I'm going to bring that back in. I'm going to save it right here as demo list as container. And now I've got it in case something goes south on me, which would not exactly be new. So let's give ourselves a little more space, and we'll take our footer, our report footer, and move that on down. And now let's insert a list. And remember, the list is the one that does not have a wizard. So we'll draw that on down, and now we have a list. And what we're going to do is associate this list's grouping right off the bat with, well, I've got the wrong, because this comes in off the template, I've got the wrong data set down here. So I'm going to dump that data set. Yeah. And I'm going to add a data set. And we'll add the one we just did, but we'll browse into it just to show it to you. Shared data sets, and here's my fiscal year calendar we just looked at. And I'll say okay, and now I've got that. I'm going to rename that. And we'll rename it to, and it really doesn't much matter here, it's just for my reference. It would matter if I was going to pass this through. That is, save it for somebody. Fiscal year 7, 8, and 9, you know, shared data set, and that sounds fine. Remember, that's just changing this instance down here. Now I'm going to right click here, and let's take a look at the row group properties. Details are always named details to start with. Back over to general. Now if I go add and pull this down, it is empty. We've got to fix that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take product category name, and I'm going to dump that over in here. All right, just so that we've got it. And now let's go in to see what happened. Row group, group property, and now when we go add and pull down my list, you see I've got everything. And if you remember before what we did, let's cancel out and go back over and look. Back over and look. Back over and look if I can get this thing to start on. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Just a second. Okay, remember I grouped first on product category name and then on fiscal year. So let's go back to where we're grouping ours up. Right click, row group, group properties. We're going to add. We're going to group on product category name, and then we'll add again, and we'll group on fiscal year. Let's change this name up here, and we're just going to change it so that we can recognize it a little better. Fiscal year, and I'll also say category. Right, just so I can understand the expression. So I've got that down here as product category name, and let's bring fiscal year on over. And just line that up, and let's run it just to make sure she works. Audio for 07, audio for 08, and you see we're already getting in good shape down in here as we come on. And we'll come back over here, 08, TV and video. So back over to the design. So everything's working rather well. Now what we want to do is we're going to go through and we're going to insert a graph. So if I come back over, let me pause a second and get it, show you the other one. All right, here's my graph. And I need to expand this out some so you can see it. So I inserted a graph down here, and under values, I've got some sales amount and some return amount, which is going to be fine because the sum it's going to return it for is the individual row that would return off of that query. So let's go in and set that up for you. Off of that, over here. I'm going to right click in the body of the list itself, and I'm going to insert a chart. And we'll take a bar chart or a column chart, that's fine. And we'll say okay, and some of the things we don't need, we'll just dump this on out. We don't care about that, and we don't care about that. We'll leave this series in, though it really doesn't much matter. Now over here in the chart data, this details we don't want. We don't want the details, we just want one compared over to the other. And we're going to add those values in there now. First thing we're going to add is product category. We're going to add sales amount. That's what we want to compare. And then sales return amount. So we've got this. And normally we go in here and clean this up. All right, and let's move it up a little bit so we can see that we've got that. And now let's run the chart just to make sure she works. All right, the chart displays, and you see all this garbage. Let's get rid of that. We don't really care about that. We can dump that on out because it's just not going to give us much sense. And normally we would come through, and I'm going to delete that also, just so we've got something that shows a little better. And we change out the chart title, so it describes what we're coming through and looking at. So now we've got that, and you can see this little bitty itty in that line down here. Now back on your design view, by the way, another thing you want to do, let's see if we can get this cleaned up a little. And we move that up a little and just shorten this some like that. We're going to get down here and we're going to separate this out. We're going to insert a line. We're inserting this line so that it's easier to read for the person that's coming through and reading it, so that when we do that separation, all right, and we'll change that to be a little thicker, 3-point. And now when you come through and run it, so I've got audio for 2007, and here's my chart, and the line separates out each individual row. Here's 2008, 2009. Here's TV and video coming on through, and let's go to the end. And now we know we're at the report end because here's my report footer. Let's go back over to design view. Pause a second. Okay, we're back over and actually looking at the one that I created down here. And if you notice, we have more details here. And the only way that all of this is up here in category. If we come through and look at it, this is just the text box and its values, categories. It comes on down, and all I did was I changed the fonts by selecting that, and then coming in, I changed everything to Georgia 10 so that when it runs, move this over so that doesn't confuse you. So when it runs, category up here, TV and video, fiscal year 2007. You see this fiscal year down here is actually, if we come down and take a look at it, is an expression that was set up equals Fields fiscal year value, and that was just dragging and dropping this on over. So here's the category, product category name now displays category TV and video fiscal year 2007, right? Sales, that's a text box, that's a text box. Sales less returns is a text box. This field here was just sales amount dropped over in here, some sales, and these are just text boxes, and you can go through and you can select them. So now we just added the sum sales return. Now this expression is interesting. Sales less return. Let's go in and look at that. This is just a VB expression, and all we did was we took fields down here. You see the individual fields. Normally you might be used to seeing data sets down in here and seeing this sum, sales amount, etc., etc. But up here in the fields collection, you see sales amount does not say sum. It's because I'm in a list. So now fields, sales amount. So I want the sales amount minus the return amount. And that's going to give me this sales less return. Sales, less the returns. This percentage is very handy down here. This percentage represents what they're seeing here. Let's take a look at that. Again is a calculation, and I just changed the font to bold. If I right click here and I go into the expression, so now what I've got, and I brought this in off of here, is you see the sales return amount value, right? Sales return amount value divided by the fields collection sales amount value, and that I said okay. And then also on the text box property, if we can get that up and running, there we go. Text box property in the number, I changed that to percentage, decimal places too. All right. Now when we run that, remember this is these are all just text boxes, and these are calculations. This individual graph. Now when we run it, See, we've got sales versus returns, and you can go through and you continue to clean it up and move it around, etc. Besides, instead of using a graph, you could have used we can use an indicator, but that gets a little ugly, using these indicators. So you could use a graph. You could also come through and embed if you want a table, etc. But this does a pretty good thumbnail. If these ratios are closer, then the graph will be closer also. And then, by the way, I also came in and I saved it. And I also went in and I saved publish report parts, and I went through and I published all my reports parts. So I had a list with a graph and then my data set. And I'll close on out of that. And that's the idea of using a list as a container for other objects.